Good evening, members. If you please remain standing, please, for 1 minute silence to remember two former members who recently passed away. Peter Robinson, who represented Malkin Ward from 1999 until 2007, and Ron Hetherington, former Cabinet member and Mayor. Ron represented Leek Ward and Saw Valley Ward from 1999 until 2020. Thank you. So good evening and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's council meeting. And I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the local authorities' executive arrangements, meetings and access to information, England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. Any councillor who wishes to speak should raise their hand and your request will be noted. You'll be asked to speak in turn by me and then you may turn on your microphone. Once you have finished speaking, would you please turn off your microphone? In respect of voting, when asked by me, councillors should raise their hand to indicate how they wish to vote. If a roll call is requested, councillors' names will be called out as previously referred to. A councillor may raise a point of order or make a personal explanation at any time by raising their hand, and I will hear them immediately, and my ruling on the matter will be final. During a debate, if I stand up, any councillor speaking at the time must stop and sit down. Everyone in the room must be silent. Moving on to a moment of reflection, I'd like to invite Rihanna Lakin and Charlotte Lees from Headway to lead us into a moment of reflection. If you'd like to take your place at the table, please, ladies. And when you're ready, press the right-hand button to speak.
Success. Good evening. I'm Rihanna from Headway Nottingham. This is Charlotte Lee, Scale Services Manager. Thank you so much for inviting us to infiltrate your meeting this evening. It's fab to be with you. Thank you very much. So Headway Nottingham is essentially a rehabilitation day centre. So we provide rehab, support, advocacy and friendship opportunities for people living within the Nottinghamshire boundary who are living with really complex and profound disabilities as a result of a brain injury. So some of those people that we support have sustained their injuries traumatically through, for example, a car accident, or perhaps they've been assaulted or had a fall. But we do also support those people who have had strokes or brain tumours or infections or even after heart attacks. No matter how someone's brain injury is sustained, we can support them. If they're 18 plus, we can support them for as long as they need us. And that's what makes us unique in the area. We're the only organisation to do that without a time limit. So that's all very good and interesting, but just to paint a bit more of a picture for you, I'd like to introduce you to a gentleman called Raj. There he is. I'm sorry for those at the back. So Raj was 21 years old when he crashed his dad's car. He'd just come off the Nottingham Night roundabout and he'd swerved to avoid a deer, went down into a ditch and the car went into a tree. His injuries were so severe that his family were told to come and say their goodbyes at the bedside at the QMC. But our wonderful Raj is not anyone who likes to do as he's told or to behave predictably. And happily, 20 years on from his accident, he's with us at Headway Nottingham. He attends 2 full days a week. Now, Raj is able to weight bear when he stands, but he does rely on a wheelchair to move around, and he has a significant tremor in his functioning arm. Also, his communication it's a bit slow, and sometimes it's a bit tricky to understand what he's saying, but he is absolutely living his life, and that's a life that his parents were braced not to expect him to have. Now, for the most part, we're all aware that these horrendous things can happen, absolutely. And largely we try and sort of ignore it and hope that magically those things don't happen to us. But unfortunately, and without meaning to be a doom fairy, actually every 90 seconds, someone in the UK is admitted to hospital with a brain injury. And that is much more frequent than cancer diagnoses in the UK. But back to Raj. Raj is really engaged with his rehabilitation. He's so keen to keep moving forward and to keep improving himself. Now, I don't know if you can see in the picture, he's holding a frame. Inside that frame is some embroidery work that he did in a therapeutic textiles class that happens on a Thursday afternoon at Headway. He was busy avidly working away this afternoon. Now, therapeutic textiles is amazing for dexterity and for fine motor skills, which is really important to someone like Raj. But it's also amazing for patience and task planning and execution and confidence and just understanding that you can actually still achieve and develop a new skill. But before Raj was able to benefit from all of those things, the first thing he had to conquer was to overcome his significant tremor and actually thread an embroidery needle by himself. Something that seems so small and insignificant a thing to achieve for all of us, but for Raj, it was huge. But when he achieved that independently, it's like he opened up a whole world of achievement and possibility. It reminded him that he was still able to learn new things and he could still move forward. He was invigorated and he was empowered. And in fact, he was so thrilled. Last Christmas, his family had all embroidered Christmas presents with their initials on. It was beautiful. He was quite rightly proud of himself. Since his accident, Raj has returned to university. He's completed his criminology degree that was interrupted by his accident at Nottingham Trent Uni. He got a 2-1. He's also currently looking at, he's really keen to find his way in the world of work, and that's something that we're supporting him to do. He's also looking to find an independent living placement, and that's something that we're moving forward with him as well. And of course, when we get that organised, we'll be with him to sort all of the foundational stuff. We'll make sure he has the correct benefits in place. We'll advocate for him with social care or with new support workers, and we'll make sure that he can complete all of those individual daily living activities that we take for granted, like handling your own correspondence, all of those sorts of things. His ultimate aim is to become a motivational speaker. I'm sure Charlotte will agree with me that we have no doubt that he will achieve that, and he'll be very inspiring along the way. So Raj is just one of the 70 people that we're supporting at the centre. People just like you and I, all people that are working towards really achieving, really moving forward and feeling positively about their future, having aspiration again, and ultimately living a life that isn't defined by disability. So if you'd like any more information about what we do, please do look us up online. We're Headway Nottingham everywhere, not just Headway Nottingham. That's really important. And very importantly, if you think there's anyone in your respective areas that we could offer support or guidance to, please do bear us in mind and encourage them to get in touch. We'll be very, very pleased to hear from them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. If you could just switch the button on. Thank you. And I'm sure members will agree it's an absolutely worthwhile charity, and you're doing a marvellous job there. Well done. You're welcome to stay for the meeting if you wish, or the escape route is that way. Thank you. Right, moving on to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Calvert, Councillor Della, Councillor Inglis, Councillor Polenta and Councillor Way.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest? Nope. And we'll move on then to item 3, to approve as a correct record of the minutes of the meeting, council held on the 23rd of May 2024. Councillor Clark to move, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to move those minutes.
Councillor Brennan.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to second.
All in favour? Anyone against? Abstentions? Then I declare the vote carried. Mayor's announcements. I suppose I better stand up for this one. Not very long. First of all, I'd like to welcome Sarah Pregan, our future monitoring officer, who has joined us this evening to undertake the role of monitoring officer in Gemma's absence. Welcome. Since becoming mayor, I've attended 18 functions, 3 of which were at Southall Minster, one being the civic service for the chairman of the county council, Richard Butler. Before the service, lunch was served in the walled garden of the Bishop's Palace. And the Bishop gave a talk on the history of the palace, some of which going back 1,000 years. He said at one time the whole of Nottinghamshire was part or in the Diocese of York when Southall Minster was then just a tiny church. Even today, the Diocese of Southall includes a small part of Yorkshire. So I guess, knowing this we can, although we know we are, officially call ourselves Northerners. I also had the pleasure of taking afternoon tea with the residents of Westdale Care Home in West Bridgford and made 2 ladies very happy by sitting with them. They said it had been many years since a young man had sat next to them.
Who was it?
One of them, bless her, was 100 and had made a cake for the occasion. And I must have made a good impression as they have invited me back to call their bingo at Christmas. And I also managed to walk nearly 5 kilometres around Lady Bay by judging the wheelbarrow gardens and visiting the open gardens. A very enjoyable event indeed, but needed a sit down and a cup of tea with the obligatory cake afterwards. Another great proms in the park with 8,000 people attending, and what a view it was from the stage to see most of them dancing to Motown. Absolutely brilliant. And can I thank all the Rushcliffe Borough Council staff for working so hard both before and on the day for making it happen. Ratcliffe-on-Trent Carnival last weekend attracted hundreds of people, and I thank them for inviting me to what was a fantastic community event with something for everyone. And my final civic visit last week was to Ruddington Bowls Club, a centenary match. They made me very welcome, and again, the obligatory cake was offered, and I enjoyed it so much that I may join them next season. Now, I've sent you all information of my charity race nights at Trent Bridge. Ticket sales are going well, so please, if you are intending to attend, please, to avoid disappointment, reserve your ticket by emailing me, please. And I'm sure you've noticed the envelope on your table with 5 books of my charity raffle tickets. Please, if you could try and sell them on my behalf, it would be very much appreciated. And please let me have the stubs and cash or hand it to a member of Democratic Services. And if you do not wish to help, just leave them on your table and they'll be collected after this meeting. Thank you. So moving on then to item 5, the leaders' announcements. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I've got a few announcements, but perhaps I could start by adding to your welcome to Sarah Pregan as well. Welcome to Rushcliffe, and I hope you have a very easy time looking after us. So several rather interesting things. The first one is that I attended the Touch Rugby World Cup finals at the University Highfields this week on Monday. It's actually happening all this week. And in fact, that is the reason why Councillor Inglis sent his apologies, because he is officiating at those finals. It was an absolutely fantastic opening ceremony. And I have to say, it's one of the jewels in Rushcliffe's crown that I knew nothing about, because the chief exec of Touch Rugby is from Nottingham Rugby and actually has organised the whole thing. And the Gresham Club, Touch Rugby Club, is actually the largest in the country, and they play there every week. There were 127 countries participating, 4,000 players from all around the country, the world, and I do mean all around the world. It was a phenomenal event, and it's something that we really need to add to and promote more as the sporting quarter of the Greater Nottingham area. And finally, as part of that ceremony, again, I didn't realise, but the Spencer Academy at Eastleigh, the choir from the school actually sang for the assembled players as part of the opening ceremony. So it was a magnificent affair. Next, Chris Boardman actually came through the borough yesterday, cycling on his Pedal to Paris challenge, where asking for people and organisations to sign the Going for Green pledge. And he asked us to sign that pledge. It is in aid of promoting green issues. So, for instance, the pledge includes agreeing to reduce energy and water usage, champion walking, cycling and lift sharing, drastically reduce reliance on single-use plastics, recycle waste and increase the use of sports equipment and kit, boost activity to nurture nature and wildlife. He cycled through to Home Pip on his way through to Paris in time for the start of the Olympics. So that was quite something for us. Turning to awards, we were shortlisted for 2 awards. The National Planning magazine shortlisted us under the National Planning Awards, the award for promoting economic growth for the development of the local development order for Rushcliffe Power Station. And we were also shortlisted through the regional RTPI, the Royal Town and Planning Institute, the East Midlands Award for Planning Excellence in the category of Best Plan. We didn't actually win, but it was great to have been shortlisted, Mr. Mayor. And finally, just to let you know, I did write last week to James Naish, MP, to congratulate him on his election as Member of Parliament for Rushcliffe, and I have invited him to come and visit the borough so that we can establish a working relationship and hopefully gain some extra conduit into government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Moving on to item 6, Chief Executive's announcements. There aren't any. And there's no citizens' questions. And there's no petitions being presented on item 8 tonight. So we'll move on then to item 9 on your agenda this evening, the approval of the scrutiny annual reports. And Councillor Clark to move, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I've great pleasure in moving this approval of the scrutiny annual reports. The scrutiny process is a very important part of council activities. It shouldn't be underestimated because it helps towards checks and balances and it helps towards contributing to policy development, and it asks and challenges a lot of questions. It challenges the cabinet, it challenges the officers and all our processes and activities. So it shouldn't be underestimated. So after Councillor Brennan has seconded it, perhaps I could invite you to invite each of the chairmen, starting with Councillor Comblack, the chairman of the overview, followed by the other scrutiny groups, just to highlight some of their activities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. And we'll call then to Councillor Cumblebeck to give a report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All in all, I think we've had a very productive year, as outlined in the agenda. We've made applying for scrutiny simpler and clearer by redesigning the scrutiny request form. Rather than requiring a matrix to be completed, We're also inviting councillors to attend community overview scrutiny group meetings and present their requests in person. Whilst not all requests have proceeded directly to scrutiny, in some cases they've been directed to other council channels or referred to the relevant council director. In addition, the open space management and housing development has been referred to Cabinet, and the leader is already gathering information to lobby government on this matter. This does not mean that matters are not considered worthy of scrutiny, but that better, clearer and more effective outcomes may be achieved through alternative routes, with the final option of returning for scrutiny with a more succinct idea of the request. I therefore urge all councillors to continue to put forward items for scrutiny, but ask that they engage with the relevant officers in the first instance. This may in fact save valuable time and money. I believe this year's items have been clearly summarised in the agenda document, so I don't intend to take up your time, Mr. Mayor, with repeating verbally what is in the report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cumberbeck, and I'll call upon Councillor Edivine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I'll take the report as having been read, and I'd like to start off by thanking all of the members of the Governance Scrutiny Group for attending the meetings and making some good debates. I'd like to thank the Vice Chair, Councillor Gowland, for supporting me. I think it's fair to say that governance differs from the other scrutiny groups because we tend to monitor performance of the council rather than looking ahead. So we're looking behind us and making sure that we're doing things properly. When I took over as chair, I was assured that every meeting had lasted less than 2 hours. So the first meeting went on for 3.5 hours. To be fair, we had a lot on the agenda, and there was a lot of stuff to do with the Constitution. And in hindsight, we possibly should have parked that to one side and actually had a member working group. As a result of the length of that meeting, we did have a member working group. A lot of the Constitution changes were to do with planning, and I'd like to think that we've come up with the right solutions, and so it's a good example of scrutiny in action. I think at the beginning of the year, we had one comment from a member at our first meeting reminding us that we must not scrutinise, we must be scrutinising, not just rubber stamping reports. I think it's I think that's something that was very important to highlight, but it should also be said that we are lucky as a council to have such a good team of officers. And we should commend the fact that with our internal and external audits, they're always so positive, and applaud the speed with which our accounts are verified. That's unusual for councils, and I think we should be proud of how quickly we do it. And certainly when I asked our auditors what it is that allows them to do that, basically they said it was the quality of the reports they receive from our officers. Finally, I'd just like to highlight, it never sounds particularly exciting, but I would recommend that all members attend Treasury Management training. We have a company that delivers it to us. It's obviously it's a mandatory training for members of the scrutiny committee, but it actually provides an awful lot of information about how we look at finances and things like that. And you can even apply it to managing your own budget at home. So I would certainly recommend to councillors that when that training comes up, it's well worth attending, even though it doesn't look a particularly exciting subject. So on that note, I'd like to say that's my short summary of this year's activity.
Thank you, Councillor Edivine. I'll now call upon Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community Scrutiny Group, as always every year, has a wide ranging of subjects, and often I think councillors who attend those meetings find them quite interesting in the range of subjects that we touch upon, and might even say it's one of the most interesting and getting your teeth into scrutiny groups that we have. We did kind of look at all the community partnerships that the borough has, areas of community concern, and that also looking at community concern around the health and well-being of our residents, but also looking at the council's responsibility around the environment and helping with residents being environmentally sustainable. So some of the areas that we've looked at is like the review of the Canal and River Trust partnership, social housing models, smoke control areas in the borough. We changes and any aircraft noise in general. Also looked, as we have every year, the annual review of our carbon management plan to make sure that we're getting on track with the net zero in 2030. And then also we had an update on Streetwise, which recently came into the Borough Council. So I'd just like to finish on thanking all councillors who are on the scrutiny group, but also to those who have often come and substituted, because they often like comment afterwards about how good the topic and the discussions are, and the discussion around it and the presentations and the information, and also to Councillor Platt for all of her support throughout the year as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And finally, Councillor Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief, having only taken over the committee 2 meetings ago, the second of which was only last night. I've been pleasantly surprised at the contribution and the willingness to work together from all of the councillors and the officers on the group. And it's been a really productive way of doing business, I found. We've had quite a variety of different topics that have come to growth and development scrutiny. Not least the first one was very lively with the management of open spaces. And I seem to have a knack of most of the topics that have come up have been being brought back again and again. So there's plenty of work for the committee to be carrying on with through into next year. And again, just to thank the officers and the Vice Chair, Councillor Way, and my predecessor, Councillor Walker, for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Now we'll open it up to discussion, and it's been indicated that Councillors Gowland and Plants have indicated to speak. Councillor Gowland first, please.
Thank you very much. So, as has been said, I'm Vice Chair of Corporate Scrutiny, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of Councillor Devine. I'd like to point out the reason the meeting was 3.5 hours has nothing to do with you. It was, well, you're a good chair. The subject matter is dense. Maybe I'm a bit too dense to cope with it. We have had some absolutely excellent presentations and trainings, I have to say. You know, the officers bring in some really good teams, in particular the training team. I feel that maybe there's a bit of work to do in de-densifying the topics sometimes, but thank you very much to all the officers for all the work and for answering my endless questions. Thank you.
Councillor Plant.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that this is my first year to actually experience the cabinet scrutiny system, because when I was on Rushcliffe before, it was still the committee system. So I'm still sort of getting used to it. I have to say, as Councillor Williams has already said, that we've had some really interesting topics during the past year. And I think what I've learned in terms of my time with the scrutiny is the importance of actually ensuring the right officer or the right outside speaker actually comes to the committee. And also that they are clear why this particular topic is being scrutinised. As Councillor Williams has said, we've had some really interesting topics to scrutinise, and one of which certainly was social housing and social housing models, and bringing back Streetwise back into the council, which was really a thoroughly interesting meeting, and a very good speaker who came and delivered that. But I do find, in terms of scrutiny, that decisions that perhaps we have made, certainly on the topics we've covered, haven't really impacted on policies or the corporate strategy, or perhaps the quality of life for our residents. That may be because we haven't, of the topics we've covered. But the present scrutiny system was being developed when I was on the council before, which was 2018. And that is 6 years ago. And I'm perhaps wondering that it isn't perhaps time to look at the system again to ensure that it is working, or perhaps to put a scrutiny request form in to scrutinise scrutiny at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Plant. Now call upon Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Way is unable to be here tonight. She's Vice Chair of Growth and Development Scrutiny Group. And in terms of her role, she's expressed some disquiet about communication in the process of putting this report together and in general. In terms of the work of the group, she's not entirely satisfied with the report on the discussion about management fees or the role of Cabinet in glossing over the concerns of the scrutiny group and subsequent reluctance to allow further issues around this to come to scrutiny. My interpretation is that the recommendation of the scrutiny group was ignored and overturned in the subsequent report that went to Cabinet, and this does not reflect an effective challenge process, in my view. In terms of the scrutiny process in general, we're pleased that this has evolved and been improved to some extent, and we thank Councillor Cumberlack and officers for their work on this. But there's still a way to go before we can feel it's fully effective. The peer challenge recommended that scrutiny be reviewed, and there appears to be a reluctance to do so. That recommendation will have resulted from multiple comments made by members during the peer challenge meetings. A matrix has been submitted to Corporate Overview Group to take this forward, but it's being resisted with plans instead to have training for members. We would rather look at options to improve Rushcliffe's scrutiny process, rather than training councillors in the operation of our currently ineffective system. We request that any future scrutiny training is led by an external trainer to bring a fresh perspective. We feel it would be productive for members and officers to attend any training session together, to look at change and to encourage joint expectations of the process and a more collaborative way of working between members and officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Richard Mallender, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd just like to thank other members who are on the Community Scrutiny Group. It's been very, very interesting topics that we've covered over the last year. Smoke controlled areas, carbon management plan, and so on. I do feel that there's some strength to the previous speaker's comments here. It is quite a few years now since we put the new scrutiny arrangements in place. I still think of them as new, but they're not so new now, are they? And the previous ones did cover the committee system that we had before. And I think it is possibly useful to say, do we need to look at this again? Do we need to make sure we're doing it the right way? How can we improve the scrutiny process? There may be instances where it's not working as people intended or as well as people intended. And there's always new things that we can learn and try out. And I know that when we did change to these new scrutiny processes, the new ones, a few years ago, we did intend to keep reviewing that process at the time so that we'd be carrying new ideas forward. In my day job, I deal with a wide number of councils across England, and many of them sort of live or fail by how good their scrutiny is. It's not just about the councillors, it's how well they're able to hold the executive to account. And that's a very good thing that we have done in the past in Rushcliffe, but just because we've been good at it in the past doesn't mean we must rest on our laurels. So I think that perhaps we should take again a look at how we do our scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. Does anybody else wish to speak on the matter? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all the chairmen of the various groups for their comments. Just to briefly take up some of the other comments that have been made, and Councillor Thomas referred to training, and certainly we have had in the past external training that has taken place, so there's no reason why that shouldn't be looked at again, and I'm certainly all in favour of ensuring that the scrutiny is effective for sure. In terms of the managed spaces, I know that she's aware, because I've had various conversations with Councillor Thomas that that's very much a topic that is current, and we are looking at the whole process of managed open spaces, and indeed I'm wanting to, and I am gathering evidence in order to campaign and lobby government for changes and improvements to the way that managed open spaces are managed. In terms of looking at the scrutiny process, then that's possibly something that Councillor Combalak, as chairman of Overview, can have some conversations. And to be honest, it's something that is constantly being looked at, because these are the sorts of things that can evolve, and you can sometimes make changes on the way. And so, if the Overview group, or in consultation with officers and cabinet, if we find and can think of ways of improving it, then by all means, those suggestions can come forward. But in the meantime, Mr. Mayor, I'm very grateful for the scrutiny function that is undertaken in this council. As I said at the beginning, I don't underestimate it. It is an important process, and we need to ensure that it does stay effective. But I thank everybody for contributing to it over the last year.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We'll put it to the vote then, the approval of the scrutiny. And in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? I declare the vote carried. Move to item 10 on the agenda, the productivity plan. Councillor Verdi to move, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As members may recall, I informed Council in March of the requirements of the then Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to develop a productivity plan for Rushcliffe Borough Council. And today, for transparency, Council are asked to formally adopt this productivity plan. The productivity plan is based on the Council's transformation and efficiency plan, which has already been approved by full Council in March 2024 as part of the medium-term financial strategy. This report seeks Council endorsement of the productivity plan, which is to be submitted to the government by the 19th of July, which actually is tomorrow. It focuses on 4 key themes, as shown in the table at paragraph 3.2 in Appendix A, which breaks down various projects, and as I said earlier, already approved by full Council with the budget in March. These include the transformation of services to make better use of resources, take advantage of advances in technology, reduce wasteful spend within systems, which the Council terms reducing discretionary expenditure as part of that efficiency drive, and barriers preventing activity that the government can help to reduce or remove. So I'd like to highlight 2 additional areas which are included in the report. Firstly, the report includes the Council's response to the 4th key theme I referred to earlier, and that's regarding barriers. These are detailed in full in section 4.1 of Appendix A, with some listed in paragraph 4.4 in the covering report. The second is very importantly contextualising the environment the Council has been working in. And I'm sure you recall some of the discussions we had in the budget process in March regarding these. But the graph at paragraph 1.4 of Appendix A demonstrates that the Council's core spending power, and that is the funding it receives to provide services from council tax, business rates and government grants, in real terms has reduced. This is primarily due to the fact that the increase is lower than what was a much higher rate of inflation. Although the number of households has risen within the borough from 48,130 in 2014-15 to 53,803 to current levels in 23-24, and of course council tax revenues have gone up as a result. However, our net expenditure has also risen. Thus, what we call the core spending power has reduced per dwelling. In addition, the council staffing levels have reduced during this time due to various reasons. However, In conclusion, I'm pleased to reiterate, as highlighted at March Council, there's been no obvious diminution in services provided by the council or the quality of services provided by the council. We continue to deliver for the residents of Rushcliffe whilst delivering further efficiencies as required by this productivity plan. As with the medium-term financial strategy, the plan is fluid and will evolve over time as both the environment we work in and the MTFS also changes. The plan will be submitted, as I said, by Peter Linfield, our Director of Finance and Corporate Services, tomorrow. And with that in mind, I move the recommendation as per the report in section 2 that the council adopts the productivity plan and supports the submission to government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. Do we have a seconder?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. And Councillor Jen Walker's indicated she wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Labour Group would like to thank the officers for the time they've spent in making this plan. It will most likely mark the end of reforms brought in by Michael Gove's Levelling Up Department. But we are not able to support the document as it still bakes in the cuts we opposed in March to the borough's transformation and efficiency plans. We feel the barriers mentioned in the report were important to highlight, as Councillor Verdi did, and they showed the need for greater devolution, but also the challenges that councils face these past 14 years. Not only would it improve local democracy, the devolution that is, but also would allow us to work more collaboratively to increase our spending power and improve services more broadly. Although we feel the inclusion as well of a multi-year settlements and also the lack of what is clarity around the new homes bonus should have also featured in that list, because they're key factors as to why this council or different councils leap from one financial crisis to the next in the most turbulent of times. We're hopeful that there will now be a new tone towards local government that no longer sees councils pitted against each other for desperately needed funding. But it will also mark the ends of words such as wasteful to much needed local government spending. We hope to see an attitude of recovery and not retribution, as any council's ability to function financially is something we should all be working towards as representatives. As we all know, the incredible good that can be done and has been done historically through local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Thomas, your hand went up first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting to note in 4.2 that the council has taken the decision to use the term reducing discretionary expenditure instead of looking at reducing wasteful spend within systems as requested by the previous government. These two things are, of course, completely different. There could very well be wasteful spend in non-discretionary areas and effective and cost-effective spend in discretionary areas. Anyway, it's a good report, though government moves on, possibly with different requirements, and maybe even removing some of those barriers to activity that our officers have identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Chewing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the officers for the time that's been put into this report. Myself and my colleague will not be supporting this report for the same reasons we let out at the budget meeting some time ago. A couple of highlights, really. Talk about efficiencies. I call them cuts. I call them increasing taxation. We've got the increase in parking revenues, which is a significant increase in affecting our residents, but also our businesses. The reductions in the public realm and conveniences, Radcliffe and Trent, for example. And this is what I can't support. I do accept there's uncertainty and there's issues, and there has been issues for a long time in relation to the amount of money that this council gets, along with our neighbouring councils and councils up and down this country. I share Councillor Walker's hope that this new government may change this. However, unfortunately, we've already heard from the new Chancellor saying that she'll keep to the same fiscal rules. So where will that money come from? And for me, I really do hope there will be change, but I doubt it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewing. Councillor Birch. Oh. Does anybody else wish to speak? If not, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what's important to set out is there's been a lot of promises by the new government and etc. manifest about extra money coming. At the minute, we've not seen that be announced in terms of any extra money coming our way. So, of course, we have to go forward with the plan we've got in front of us now, which is to deliver the transformational savings. And some of the savings we're doing, you could say we'd be doing if we had a budget an extra 50, 60 million than we have now, because it's still important to be effective with the money that we have coming in. I mean, there's been a couple of comments around public conveniences, for example. Those are still being delivered by parish councils. I remember for the budget workshop being told we're having to chase up the parish councils to ask if they actually wanted our money towards it, which shows that our money wasn't particularly needed by those parish councils. And it was to make it fair, because is it right someone in Bingham is paying for the public toilets in Eastleigh and vice versa? So when we've got parish councils to deliver those services. So, and things like car parking, people raised that to me before, and I was actually speaking to a resident on the doorstep ahead of the election, and of course, they came to me and said, "Oh, why has it gone up?" And I made the point where we could have put it on council tax, but there's so many visitors that come to West Bridgford with the economy. I know from my colleagues at the county council, if they go for a night out, it's to come to West Bridgford, not go to City Centre. And it's about, do you put that charge on people who use the facilities, or do you put it across everyone in the borough, including people who don't always use them? And I think what's important to say as well, we're not just putting things up, we continue to invest. If you go to Bridgford car park recently, it's all brand spanking new and looks fantastic. And even with Rushcliffe Country Park, over £1 million in terms of investment going into that park, so people are getting something extra for the money they're paying. So it's a really good report, and thank you to Peter and team for it together. I mean, we have to keep going forward as a plan for now. Let's hope that the new government live up to their promise and give us more money. If they don't, we continue going forward and to go ahead with still delivering quality service that we are doing, but also at the same time reviewing all the services we do to make sure they are cost efficient to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Verdi, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to members for their very insightful comments. I'd like to just pick up on some of those points. Councillor Walker mentioned that the efficiencies are baked into our budget. I mean, yes, absolutely they are, because if you recall, without going through the entire budgetary process, it was a very challenging situation. I'm sure we all remember, all members will remember Section 115s and lots of notifications and announcements about councils who were in jeopardy. We produced a balanced budget, and in the workshops, we had a look at all of our expenditure, our revenues, and so on, and we agreed a balanced budget, which we brought into this year, which includes those efficiencies which were agreed by members in this room. Picking up on the point about working collaboratively, absolutely, that's what this productivity report is going to do. It is our approach, our transformation and efficiency programme, which we will use as part of the productivity report being submitted to work collaboratively with the government to ensure that we can continue to deliver as we have efficiently for our residents and drive out further efficiencies and cost savings. And funding settlements, yes, of course, I think having visibility in one-year funding settlements, it goes without saying, that is going to be beneficial for all councils. With regards to Councillor Thompson's comment regarding discretionary spend, it's not just the discretionary spend element. I would remind all members, our transformation and efficiency programme was based on a threefold approach, which is identifying those cost efficiencies, also income generation opportunities, as well as alternatives for the future delivery of our services. And I would also like to remind members, since its inception, our transformation programme has actually delivered £7 million worth of savings. And that's probably the reason we haven't been issued with Section 115 as other councils have. So in summary, I think very helpful comments, and clearly there is a lot of engagement with our members with the budgetary process and our finances, and I welcome that, and I would welcome the opportunity to go through further some of the points which have been raised, and also pick up on any ideas or opportunities that we have to continue the efficiency drives. But I think, as has been agreed, it is a very good report by a number of members, and I would also like to thank Pete and the team for turning our transformation and efficiency plan into the productivity report. And by way of another reminder, you'll recall we received an additional £138,000, which is part of an additional funding at that time provided by the government, and this was a requirement of that. So thank you, Pete, for the report, and thank you, members, for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. We'll go to the vote then. All those in favour? Anyone against? Abstentions? I declare the vote carried. Moving on to receive notices of motions submitted under Standing Order number 12. Notice of motion to be put by Councillor Birch and seconded by Councillor Chewings. Councillor Birch, you have 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would like to request a recorded vote, please. Good evening, councillors. The motion before us tonight matters to every single citizen here in Rushcliffe, and it matters nationally. We've just had the most unrepresentative general election since universal suffrage was introduced in 1928. 58% of the votes cast nationally were totally unrepresented. They were meaningless, worthless. Just think about that. It's the year 2024, and 6 out of every 10 votes cast in the UK general election counted for absolutely nothing. Anybody who voted for Richard Mallender in Rushcliffe was totally unrepresented, and the same applies for Mrs. Solomon over in Ashfield. This situation is not acceptable. We cannot call ourselves a true democracy when our voting system leads to election results that do not reflect the will of the people. Tonight, I will make the argument that first past the post is an unjust and antiquated electoral system, and that we need to replace it with proportional representation, or PR. We are not here to discuss the technicalities of which particular type of PR system to use, but to endorse the general principle that seats allocated to political parties should be directly related to the number of votes that they receive, and that every vote should matter. So to begin with, I'd like to demonstrate why first past the post is such a ridiculous and unrepresentative system. And I'd like to start with the general election result we've just had. I'll call on my beautiful assistant here to hold up this. I have emailed members these pie charts, so if you can't read it, please refer to your email. And good luck if you're trying to read this on YouTube. So this image shows a pie chart with the national vote share on top, and beneath it is the number of seats each party got. As you can see, our voting system greatly distorts the results, with the largest party having their votes exaggerated and smaller parties having their results marginalised. Excuse me. Labour got 1/3 of the vote and 2/3 of the seats. They now govern with complete power and authority, having got just 1/3 of the national vote. Reform UK, your friends, got 4.1 million votes and 5 seats. The Lib Dems got 3.5 million votes and 72 seats. And the poor old Green Party got 1.8 million votes and just 4 seats. Is that okay with any of you? How would you explain that to your children or your grandchildren? How would you justify it? I'd now like to look at image 2, which shows the 2015 general election result for Belfast South. This result holds the record for being the smallest proportion of the votes a winning candidate has ever achieved in a UK election. As you can see, the SDLP got elected with just 25% of the votes. In other words, 75% of the voters in that constituency did not vote for the winning party. That result is grotesque. It is an affront to democratic principles. Any electoral system that is capable of producing results like that is not fit for purpose. And this will happen again somewhere in the country. This will happen again in the future, and it could even happen here in Rushcliffe. Is that okay with you? And finally, I'd like to take a look at an example closer to home. This first image here is the vote share for the Rushcliffe Borough Council election in 2019. And the following image, if you could hold that up please, Keir, is the number of seats each party got. So I think it's self-evident how unfair and undemocratic the results are. In this case, Labour lost out, but the inverse is true in Labour-run councils and Lib Dem-run councils elsewhere in the country. It is patently unfair. Thank you, Keir. So we know that first past the post produces unfair results. That goes without question. Why then do people defend first past the post? Well, there are some perfectly reasonable defences of it, and it would be churlish of me to pretend otherwise. There will be councillors in the room tonight who are sincere in their defence of first past the post, and I'm sure you will defend your positions. My argument, however, is that if you were doing a pros and cons list, the cons would far outweigh the pros. So, what is the PR system that I'm asking you to endorse tonight? I want to get some facts out there, because there is a lot of misinformation within British political discourse and lots of myths. So PR is not some mythical, theoretical system which is hit and miss and people don't really know how it performs. The data is in. The experiment has been run. PR works very well. Across Western Europe, PR has been the standard electoral system since World War II. It usually produces strong coalition governments, which on average last longer than majority governments formed under first past the post. The only exception to this is Italy, which I will come on to. So rather than producing weak governments, they produce strong and stable governments. These strong, long-lasting coalitions produce excellent policy, and the governments produce excellent outcomes for their citizens. The top 10 countries in the Legatum Prosperity Index, which measures social and economic well-being, all use PR. That's all 5 Nordic countries. It's the Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, and New Zealand. All with high living standards, all with strong, stable governments, all use PR. The experiment has been run, and across geography, culture, time, and economic system, PR produces better results for citizens than first past the post. The citizens in these countries report greater satisfaction with their political system, and political engagement and voter turnout is measurably higher. The only exception to this is Italy. And I thought I'd tackle Italy because I'm going to preempt that some councillors will unleash Italy tonight as an argument in defence of first past the post and against PR. Italy is a total outlier case. And Italy has had a new government every 13 months on average since World War II. But that is not because of PR. They do use PR, but it's not because of PR. It is because of some very well understood and very well documented regional, cultural, and political differences that do not exist anywhere else, and they are not. It's not applicable here. We are not Italy, and it is a unique outlier case. And I have to say, if people bring up Italy tonight, it will be a very cynical move because it is not relevant to this discussion. We can laugh. It's a totally every other PR system in the Western world works, and Italy is the outlier. So one of the defence of first past the post that I'd like to head off is the worry about breaking down the link between constituents and their elected representatives. And again, this is a fair point, and I agree to it with it to a degree. I think personally it is desirable to have a constituency link, and I personally support a mixed voting system such as the additional member system for elections, which combine the best elements of first past the post and PR. The point is, there is an option out there to incorporate PR whilst retaining the constituency link. So in conclusion, adopting a proportional representation voting system is not just a step towards more accurate and fair elections, it is a commitment to a more vibrant and inclusive democracy. PR ensures that every vote counts and that every voice is heard. It encourages a wider range of political perspectives, fosters cooperation and coalition building, and leads to more representative and effective governance. By embracing PR, we can move away from the limitations and inequities of the first past the post system, reduce wasted votes, and ensure that minority parties receive their fair share of representation. This system promotes higher voter turnout, greater political engagement, and a more balanced and diverse legislative body. Let us choose PR to build a political landscape where our government truly reflects the diverse views and values of our society. Let us choose a system that champions fairness, inclusivity, and the true spirit of democracy. I look forward to an interesting discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Chewings, do you wish to second a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. And Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No system is perfect, and this has long been the system, as Councillor Birch has mentioned, in this country. But this proposal is not the answer. It's all very well saying, "Oh, well, don't mention any examples that don't work," but I'm surprised he didn't mention Italy. Italy is a prime example where it doesn't work, Mr. Mayor. So it's not okay to say, "Oh, well, I will only talk about examples where it's claimed to work, but where it doesn't work, then, ignore them." The reason that I'm not in favour of what he is proposing is it's the decision-making process. Now, coalitions come together. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be making good decisions. And there'll be a lot of, can you have decisive decisions? I don't know. But there'll be a lot of emphatic decisions that probably don't get passed through because of a coalition where they won't actually be agreeing amongst themselves. This isn't up to us to decide here. I appreciate that this is a request to write to the government to request a change, but I'd be interested to know whether the Labour Party actually supports this, given that they have just won a very large majority in this country, which by Councillor Birch's own evidence, they wouldn't have won an outright majority had Councillor Birch's proposal been in place. So I'm not going to spend much longer talking about this because, as I say, no system is perfect, but I don't believe this proposal is right. It is up to the government if they wish to look at it or to review or tweak anything, but the Conservative group will be voting against it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I open it up to discussion, and I've got two members indicated to speak, starting with Councillor Rex Walker, please.
Well, grazie, signor Sindaco. Now, I'd be betraying my first politics teacher, the wonderful Dr. Emma Eady, if I didn't start off by saying that our system is actually the single member plurality system. The moniker first past the post is a misnomer because, of course, there is no post to get past. But leaving that as it is, there is one small part of the motion that I can go along with. It is true to say that as a majoritarian system, ours tends to produce results where the proportion of votes cast for a political party isn't directly reflected in the proportion of seats it holds in the legislature, although not always at the expense of minor parties. Regrettably, though, Mr. Mayor, that's where my support for the motion must end. If democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people, then the method by which we choose our representatives is pivotal to that process. There are hundreds of systems out there, and we can probably agree that none are perfect. Each tend to produce different sets of outcomes, which can be assessed as strengths and weaknesses, and it's left to the rational scrutinizer to reach a considered judgment after balancing them. If we're to debate this with any degree of depth whatsoever, we must not fall into the trap, which I fear this motion has, of thinking that proportionality is or ought to be the only measure of how fair or how democratic the system is. We ought not to play noughts and crosses with this. We're playing chess, and I encourage members to see the whole board. I'm constrained on time, so I'll have to restrict myself to something of an opening gambit. Strong and stable governments are good for democracy. Majoritarian systems like ours tend to give parties control over Parliament, and that brings the ability to deliver their manifesto commitments and be subsequently held to account on them. Proportional systems tend to lead to the need for coalition governments, which, to my mind, are weaker and more unstable. A direct connection between the representative and the constituents they represent is good for democracy. Single member wards, such as we have at the moment, mean there's no ambiguity over a constituency or a constituent matter. Contrast that to many PR systems which send multiple representatives to the legislature from a single area. And many colleagues here will recognise the frustrations arising from that. Having a system that's straightforward to use and understood by voters is good for democracy. If you don't think this is important, come back to me after you've been involved in a single transferable vote count calculation. I believe our current system is well understood through centuries of use and is navigated deftly to produce outcomes which actually reflect the public mood at the time of the election. In 1997 and 2024, we were ready for change. In 2010, we'd had enough of Labour but weren't ready for a Conservative majority. In 2019, whether you like it or not, we wanted to get Brexit done. Each time our system delivered those outcomes, the ones that the people wanted. Candidates being able to win, whether they're from any political party or none, is good for democracy. PR systems with party lists of preferred candidates place far too much power in the hands of party bureaucracies who are able to manipulate membership of legislatures. It has to be said, sadly, often at the expense of female and ethnic minority candidates. Contrast this with our system, which allows victories like that seen in Leicester South and Islington North, dare I say, earlier this month. Many PR systems have built-in barriers to entry for smaller parties via minimum vote thresholds, some that are calculated nationally. How democratic are these?
30 seconds.
Finally, I'll come to what I think is the most important. I'll have to rush. Post-electoral coalitions are disastrous for democracy. Proportional systems tend to return parliaments requiring either coalitions or minority governments to be formed after the vote. And that inevitably involves horse trading behind closed doors, and we result in governments or policy platforms that a grand total of 0 people actually voted for. How fair is that? How democratic is that? And if you want an answer for that, here's something you won't hear me say
Councillor
before
Walker. I'm afraid your
or
time is
again.
up.
Ask a Liberal Democrat, because what happened to them after 2010?
Now call upon Councillor Perec, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm flabbergasted that Councillor Birch has suggested that the first past the vote system is grotesque. This system has worked over many years, not just in the UK, but many countries worldwide, and have great respect for democracy in the UK and the voting systems in this country. I can understand, though, why Councillor Birch has raised this issue, but I'm afraid I do not agree to this proposal. There are various reasons for it. Propositional PR systems often lead to a high number of political parties gaining seats in the legislature. This can result in fragmented parliaments with many small parties, making it difficult to form stable governments. And I'm going to give an example of a different country, which is Israel. Israel often faces challenges in forming stable coalitions due to the large number of small parties. The second issue I have is the PR system frequently results in coalition governments, which can be unstable and lead to frequent elections. Coalition partners may have conflicting agendas, making it hard to govern effectively. And now I'm going to bring Italy in the picture. Italy has experienced frequent changes in its government due to the difficulties in maintaining the stable coalitions. The third issue I have is that there are policy compromises. In coalition governments, policy compromises are often necessary to keep the coalition together. This can result in diluted policies that do not fully address pressing issues. For example, in Belgium, coalition negotiations can be lengthy and result in compromises that may not fully satisfy any party's policies goals. My most important concern is about empowerment of extremist parties, which I am afraid that may happen in the UK. PR systems can allow extremist or fringe parties to gain representation and influence government policy if they become part of the coalition. Example, in some instances, such as in Greece, extremist parties have gained significant representation, leading to political instability. Lastly, I would say it's a very complex system. PR systems can be more complex for voters to understand, especially when it comes to how votes are translated into seats. This complexity can lead to voter confusion and disengagement. For example, in some countries, the complexity of the PR system can lead to low voter turnout or higher rates of spoiled ballots. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perek. I've got 4 more speakers who's indicated they wish to speak after Councillor Gaunt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before the time starts, just to obviously point out that it should have come round the group leaders, shouldn't it, with a motion? Should it not? Okay. That's my bad, as they say in school. So basically, the Labour group is obviously in support of any opportunity to promote the concept of a more democratic way of running society, and we will support this motion, although we'd like to make it clear that they're somewhat sceptical as to the timing of the motion and its content. Obviously, if you believe in something fundamental, you don't change your view just because you win. That's something that we sort of don't do here. We consider at length, though, we did consider at length whether we would amend the motion, but to amend it would require considerable addition and almost a complete rewrite on our part. So it's clear, let's be clear, I'm just going to raise the concerns that we have with the motion in this speech instead. So firstly, the Labour Party has already committed to adopting PR at its conference in 2023. And if Labour membership of over 400,000 people, the affiliated trade union movement with its millions of workers, have been unable to persuade the current NEC and its Parliamentary Labour Party to adopt it as a manifesto pledge, I worry that it's a little bit sort of a stretch to believe that Councillor Birch's motion will make much of a difference there in persuading them to adopt this motion. But it seems to us that there may be a different aim for tonight's actions. So if the aim of this motion is to suggest that this current election result does not give Labour a true mandate, then we struggle to accept that perspective. The system of first past the post, of course, needs to be replaced, but not simply because of any suggestion that it's lack of a democratic mandate in this election, but because it's not been fair for many, many years, for over nearly 100 years, representing what the people actually want. For the last 100 years, no government since 1931 actually has achieved 50% of the popular vote. And that was a national government formed to deal with the crisis of the Great Depression. None of the massive majority governments of Attlee, Thatcher, Blair, Johnson, or even the current Starmer one have got near to this mark. So the first past the post system has always been flawed for many years. What the different political movements have managed to do now is to skillfully work out how to win majorities within the current framework. Clearly, in this current election, progressive majority of voters wanted to punish the Tories for their shocking decade of decline and worked out that this required a Labour government supported by other parties winning seats in other areas that they could win to reduce the Tory seats. This election outcome is actually fairly reflective, I have to say, of the desires of most of the people, because that's what was achieved. Of course, we are not suggesting that 34% is in any way a ringing endorsement. Secondly, the problem we have is just with the oversimplification of the motion. You're talking about more clarity. I think we need more clarity around the use of PR and which forms would be adopted. It'd be great to have a really detailed discussion with you about all those different types, but this doesn't seem to be the place for it. We already use PR in different forms. In the Welsh Assembly, uses the single transferable vote. Many political parties select candidates for elections with Labour using it to select their current leader. PR also exists at local levels across many nations of Europe, like you said. In fact, we're the only current European power, I believe, that still relies on first past the post to elect its government. But we do think that lumping all these things together and saying, let's use PR, is a little bit of a simplification. So there needs a bit more work on that side of things. Finally, the bit that troubles us most really is if this motion was actually about electoral reform, then it should certainly be asking for constitutional reforms to broaden universal suffrage. We should, in here, be demanding that the Labour government goes ahead with its reforms of the House of Lords, for instance, that it ensures that the manifesto pledge of 16 and 17-year-olds being allowed to vote is followed through. We should be pushing for local citizens' assemblies, abolishing the Public Order Act, repealing all the undemocratic anti-trade union laws, looking to increase more participatory democracy in the workplace and in communities. We should also be looking at removing the compulsory voter ID, which has been introduced by the Tories, which disenfranchises lots of people because people who don't traditionally carry photo ID, many of them, I know there's a big campaign to push for it, but we haven't really looked at the numbers that were put off by not having that. That tends to impact ethnic minority groups and other marginalised peoples. Actually, also, as well, we should be looking at Rushcliffe and our local borough and council elections here, which have multi-council awards, which are not really democratic. The views of local people should reflect one council each. So there's lots of things we need to be doing that could be in this thing. But we will support it as it fits our desire for a much more inclusive and democratic society. But really, we're hoping that it's about that electoral reform rather than just making some political point scoring. That's right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Gort. And I do apologise, you were quite correct. I now call across Councillor Billing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this motion personally. It goes to the core of everything that I've campaigned for in the last 10 years. And as Councillor Gaunt said, if something's put forward for what is fundamental, then I'm not going to change my view. I'm supporting this motion purely because it asks for the principle. There's no text here that actually calls for a particular model. When we get to discussions, if we ever get to discussions about the actual model, I'm sure we'll disagree and I may not be voting for what is proposed. But if it comes to the true democratisation of how we cast our votes, I will support this motion, and I urge you to agree for the principle. Now is not the time. Much of what's been said already has jumped the gun. This is not where we discuss how. This is what we discuss what. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billing. Councillor Richard Mallender, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, this is a fun one, isn't it? I quite like this. So thank you for name checking me and the results. It's was my fourth attempt to get into Parliament. I might give it another couple of goes yet. We'll see. I might get in. I'm determined to keep at it. It is a lot of hard work to stand as a general election candidate. You put in a lot of footwork. I have still not bought myself a pair of new shoes that I promised to get when I was talking to people because I was on the stump so much, but I will get around to it. Every general election, candidates get hundreds of emails. If you've never stood, you won't believe the volume of them that you get. If you stand as a European candidate, you get thousands of emails. A lot of them that came into my inbox were about this topic. They were about the change that's required to our electoral system because it fails to accurately represent the number of votes that each of the parties get around the country. I think that we need to change to a proportional system. I won't say which proportional system, but I think it would more accurately and better serve our country to have a parliament wherein people's views are accurately reflected in terms of how many votes those parties get around the country. Maybe we split it up by nation because otherwise the SNP get a paltry, tiny vote. And you certainly have to split it out to get a separate way for Northern Ireland because what is it? We've got 13 political parties in the current parliament plus 6 independents plus the speaker on top of that. So, you know, we get plenty of political parties under the existing system, but they don't get the representation in parliament that they have in the country, whether that be Green, whether it be Reform. And a great question is that people say, oh, well, it's okay. We have a majoritarian system. It gives us a big majority. It does. It gives an artificially large majority. And you then beg the question, how long can you push down on the pressure cooker of other groups that are excluded from proper or indeed in many years any representation in Parliament before you then have to say, well, why are all these people protesting on the streets? Why are the people up in arms one day? Because their views are not represented in Parliament. I've often heard it said that Labour and the Conservative Party are different because they represent a broad church of views. But then that leads to the situation where a former councillor from this chamber was saying to me, I don't know which Conservative Party I'm a member of anymore. Because as far as he could see, there were 3 different Conservative parties. You could say the same with Labour. Is the Labour Party of today the same as the Labour Party of the previous general elections? Clearly it's not. And things do change. Politics changes and moves on. When we had those first elections hundreds of years ago, not all that many hundreds of years ago, the first election, general election in Rushcliffe, was in 1885, and it was run by the Liberal John Ellis. And at that point, there were just two political parties, Liberals and Conservatives, or Liberal Unionists and Liberals. And for a long time, there was just two parties, and a first-past-the-post system, a majority-area system, gives you a broad representation at that point. And that followed through until 1918, when Labour came onto the scene. And from that point onwards, Rushcliffe usually had two or three candidates from the Liberals, Conservatives, and Labour. That persisted up until 1983, when up popped another new party, the Ecology Party, precursor to the Green Party. Typically, Rushcliffe is now contested by 5 political parties, plus independents, but typically 5. And when you get to that situation, our existing political system, the first-past-the-post system, as it's colloquially known, cannot cope. It produces an inherently unstable representation of the people. And it's not just about the fairness of it. The instability serves us poorly. The Conservative Action for Electoral Reform Group was founded in 1974. I'm looking at their website here. After an election in which the Conservatives won more votes than Labour, but
15 seconds, please. Sorry, 30 seconds.
Thank you. But fewer seats. It's well past time that we change the electoral system that we have, not just for Parliament, but for all the elections in the UK. And I would urge you to support this motion that which takes us forward, talking about the principle of going to a much better, fairer, more representative, more democratic electoral system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manager. Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like my Labour colleagues and many members on this side of the room, I'm in favour of a more proportionally representative electoral system. Whether for Westminster local council or devolved mayoral elections, the first-past-the-post system often significantly distorts the preferences of a majority of voters, instead rewarding the plurality of voters that happen to vote for a candidate achieving more votes than any other. But regularly, in fact, almost always now, well below 50% of the vote, as Councillor Birch's charts have helpfully demonstrated. I don't fear the outcome of such elections, which promote compromise and conversation between parties of all colours, and often oblige those that we might regard as being on the political fringe to moderate their positions when they take their seats in bodies like this one and other legislative bodies, and amongst elected politicians who, despite holding vastly differing views, are for the most part able to conduct themselves civilly and in accordance with the democratic traditions of the Western world. In many cases, heaven forbid, it even promotes compromise and collaboration between the main centre-left and centre-right parties in the form of grand coalitions, necessary to ensure effective government and governance, but also sustaining the values of democracy that we hold so dear. Indeed, a majority of Western countries use some form of proportionality in their electoral systems, including countries in the Anglosphere, like Australia and New Zealand, as well as the nations of Scandinavia, whose social model is a proven success story of both wealth creation and economic equality, and it is an example to the world. Further, no one said this either. 3 nations of the United Kingdom already use a proportional representative system for both their devolved parliaments and assemblies and local council elections. If it's good enough for the Welsh, the Scots and the Northern Irish, why not the English and indeed the United Kingdom as a whole? But saying all of this, I can't help but feel a level of futility with the motion as presented here tonight. If the many campaign groups and lobbyists, the Labour membership, and the many elected politicians in the Labour Party who are sympathetic to electoral reform can't convince our leadership, and it's now commanding the governing majority in Westminster to adopt this policy, what hope does a borough council that's controlled by the Conservative Party have of persuading them otherwise? And unlike many of the important issues that Councillor Birch does bring to this council, I don't see how this directly serves the residents of Rushcliffe, the priorities they hold and the specific local asks they have, not of parliamentary candidates, but of their elected borough councillors. Nevertheless, I wholeheartedly agree with the ideals behind the motion and will therefore be supporting it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor Grocott. No one else has indicated they wish to speak, so I'll go straight to Councillor Chewing. Sorry, there is.
I've debated on this one whether I'm going to speak. Do I stand here or sit here and keep my mouth shut? But anybody who knows me knows I can't keep my mouth shut, so I'll just go for it. Whew. This is a good one because Rex has come out with a lot of stuff tonight that I was thinking, wow. Because I'm getting frustrated with the electoral system, if I'm honest. I think it is outdated, way outdated. I think the Lords, well, it's just for fat cats, isn't it? It's just. Oh, we'll give you a peerage, and you can go and sign in for your day and get your £400 and go for your meal and go home or go sleep in the debating chamber. So there is something seriously wrong with our democracy at the moment. I agree. It frustrates me. It frustrates me that smaller parties get minuscule representation, if at all, and they get equal votes with, say, the votes in Scotland. You know, equal to Reform, for argument's sake, with the amount, and the Liberals getting as many as they've got in Parliament to what Reform's got or what the Greens have got. So it is frustrating. Is it something that I can support at this present juncture, just after election, where I'm pretty devastated and quite worried about, the future, if I'm perfectly honest? Certainly worried about aspiration and my family's aspiration. But is it something that I could support? And I think it's way too early. Everything's too raw in my head for me to support this. So with that and with what Rex has said tonight, I won't be supporting, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Is there anybody else hiding in the wings there that wish to speak before I go to Councillor Chewing? Councillor Chewing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the members for participating in a good debate. Just want to come back on a few points, really. Made my notes. Quickly go back to Councillor Grocott. How does this serve Rushcliffe residents? Democracy gives the views of Rushcliffe a say and a viewpoint. Now, let's have a look at that. So, we've got also Councillor Clark. Is this the answer? Can't agree with it. Well, what does resolve it? I think what we need to know is recently, well, just 2022, the Electoral Reform Society did a survey within this country to see what people's views were. 51% came out in favour of electoral reform, 44% against. There's a majority there. Dare I say, that 7%, greater than that 1.something% on Brexit, but hey, vote to vote. Let's have a look, shall we? Now, I want to touch on what Councillor Gordon said and his cynicism on the timings of this. I understand maybe why that is there, but I mean, I sent an email out before the election to all of the candidates, every single one. Pleased that Councillor Mallender responded. I'm pleased that our now MP, James Leitch, responded. None of the other candidates responded, including the previous MP. Not too sure why she didn't get elected, but hey. So let's have a look a bit more. I think we just need to go into some quotes, really. Let me read this out to you. We've got to address the fact that millions of people vote in safe seats and they feel their vote doesn't count. I also think on electoral reform, we've got to address the fact that millions of people vote in safe seats and they feel their vote doesn't count. That's got to be addressed. We will never get full participation in our electoral system until we do that at every level. Now, that's a sentiment I can agree with. Who said that? Keir Starmer, January 2020, when he was applying to be leader of the Labour Party. Now, we're in a situation, and Councillor Gort mentioned, why don't we mention about reform with regards to 16, 17-year-olds and the reform of the House of Lords? Fully support that. Very much so. We support that. But that was in your manifesto. Yeah? You talk about the timing, we had a general election, it's on people's minds, it's about instilling change, it's trying to get change. We've got an election where we've had somebody that stood up to be elected to a leader of a party on a mantra of change, gets into that position, and then drops it when they go through to election. So what do? We apply pressure in any way we can. Even at a lowly borough council, by passing a motion, it raises that stake, it raises that information and pushes it forward and reminds people that actually we do want to see change. Now, just to go back to what's up there, it's about proportional representation. It doesn't say, and it deliberately does not state, what type of proportional representation, because there are so many different types. Personally, I'm in favour of the Welsh Senedd and the Scottish Parliament with regards to the dividing up of the votes and comparison, because you still get your constituency MP, but also it evens it out, and I think it'll be fairer. And you would still get the significant share and the major parties. I think just a couple of stats before I finish. Look at this last election in 2024. Labour required, on average, 23,000 votes per seat. Reform, 821,000. Green parties, 485,000. Conservatives, 56,000. What does this do other than disenfranchise the voters? This is about bringing it back around.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And giving people a say. Not saying it's a perfect system, far from it. But it's better than what we've got. And I've said this as somebody that actually campaigned against the AV referendum all those years ago. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, the parliamentary system. And I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewings. Councillor Birch, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all members who have spoken tonight. It was a very informative debate. I'd just like to tackle Councillor Gaunt's point, and mildly disappointed that you've just assumed a nefarious motive. I've been a Liberal for most of my adult life. I've been campaigning on this for 20 years, so I have beliefs. I also believe in House of Lords reform. There's no nefarious motive here. I believe in this and always have, and I was writing about it 20 years ago. So maybe next time, please don't ascribe negative motivation. I want to talk about a couple of things that were said by councillors, and I'll start with Councillor Walker. And again, there's perfectly legitimate reasons to defend first past the post, but I just find the cognitive dissonance a little bit confusing, because 2 months ago you stood up in this chamber and you espoused the values of fair play and sportsmanship when nominating our fantastic mayor. And I just want to ask you, what is fair about the elections that's just happened? Where is the sportsmanship in that? And I just don't understand the cognitive dissonance there. It's unfair. It's patently unfair. Somebody raised the point that coalitions were weak. And again, as I said in my opening remarks, it's not true. The opposite is true. The coalitions last longer and produce better policy than majority systems produce. The governments that come out of PR electoral systems last for a longer duration than the first past the post systems. That is false. Somebody said something about lots of different parties gaining seats, as if it was a bad thing. Do you want to live in a democracy or not? You know, it's again, the cognitive dissonance of people is rather mind-blowing. Somebody else mentioned about PR being complex, and again, that's a rather condescending and patronising comment to make. As other people have said tonight, PR has been used in the UK in European elections and is currently used by other parts of the UK, and it works fine. And voters actually use it in quite sophisticated ways, and I think you're really doing the voters down, and it's a condescending attitude to have to say it's too complex and we can't deal with it. Let's just check I've covered all my bases here. Oh, Italy. So just to, for your information, Councillor Clark, I wasn't saying ignore Italy. I was saying Italy is an outlier example. It is an unusual country with a very specific and particular set of historical circumstances applying to it, which explain its voting and its high turnover of government. It is not the fault of PR as some people try and characterise it as. It is due to a particular set of historic, economic and cultural differences. So I'll just finish with this, and I thank the people who've said they will support this motion on principle, and the motion tonight has been brought to advocate for the residents of this borough. They're all voters. And just to tackle the point of the futility of this, yes, we are a borough council, and of course I'm not expecting the voting system to be changed on the basis of this motion. But it is important that we discuss this in democratic chambers. This is going to be in the press, this is going to be on social media, and it's going to instigate a discussion, and it's important. So the condescending laugh, the arrogant condescending laugh that some of you chuckled when that was mentioned, maybe you want to take a look at yourselves, because it is important we talk about issues like this. And maybe if more councils talked about issues like this country wouldn't be in the state it's in today. And I will say this, I know there are people on the Conservative side who agree with PR, because I've spoken to some of you in months gone by. And I know you've got a party whip tonight, but I would just impress upon you, there is a recorded vote, and I'm not saying that to coerce you or to pressure you, but to impress upon you that this vote will be recorded and will be in history forever. It's going to be on the record. And if you believe in it, I just encourage you to stand up and have some courage and vote for what you believe in. And I know some of you do, because you have told me. Have some courage, or else why are you even in local politics? So I would just encourage you to stand up and vote with what you think and what you believe if you do. But once again, I'd like to thank everybody for their constructive comments and for a good debate. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. And before we go to the recorded vote, I'll just remind you what the council is resolving to do tonight. Firstly, formally declare that it supports the principle of proportional representation in the UK general elections. Number two, formally declare that it supports the principle of proportional representation in UK local elections. And finally, write to HM Government to request a change in our voting system from first past the post to proportional representation. Move to the monitoring officer to call the vote.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll call each councillor by name. If you could please reply for, against or abstain so that your vote can be recorded. Councillor Barney?
Against.
Councillor Billen?
For.
Councillor Birch?
For.
Councillor Bird?
Against.
Councillor Brennan?
Against.
Councillor Brown?
Against.
Councillor Butler?
Against.
Councillor Chaplin?
For.
Councillor Chewins?
For.
Councillor Clark?
Against.
Councillor Cumberlack?
Against.
Councillor Cotty?
Against.
Councillor Eddybean?
Against.
Councillor Ellis?
Against.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Councillor Gaunt?
For.
Councillor Giorgio? Councillor Gowland? Councillor Grocott?
For.
Councillor Richard Mallender?
For.
Councillor Sue Mallender?
For.
Councillor Mason? Councillor Matthews?
Against.
Councillor
Against.
Councillor Parek? Apologies.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
Against.
Councillor Plant? Councillor Regan,
Against.
Councillor Sims, Councillor Solomon, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Upton,
Against.
Councillor Verdi,
Against.
Councillor Walker, Councillor Jan Walker,
For.
Councillor Rex Walker, Councillor Wells,
Against.
Councillor Gordon Wheeler,
Against.
Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, and Councillor Williams.
Thank you, members. The vote went as such: for 12 votes, against 26, 1 abstention. I therefore declare the motion is lost. Moving on to the second motion of the evening, put by Councillor Thomas and to be seconded by Councillor Sue Malinder. I'll allow Councillor Thomas to read it. Got 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think most people here would agree that there's a pressing need to increase green energy generation in the UK. While solar power is perhaps not the most efficient form and can only ever be part of the solution, there's no doubt that it has a part to play. As councillors, we recently received a briefing note about a new planning evidence document for Rushcliffe, the Solar Farm Landscape Sensitivity and Capacity Study. The purpose of this is to provide guidance on where in Rushcliffe's countryside solar farm developments could be sited, looking at the landscape impacts. I think most of us would agree again that we would prefer to see solar panels on rooftops, brownfield land and car parks where possible. Rushcliffe has large areas of rooftops and car parks, and the council itself owns much that could be turned to solar generation without detriment to food production, the countryside and our valued green spaces. This motion just looks at car parks, not because they're more important than rooftops or brownfield land, but in order to break the consideration down into more manageable chunks. We're eating the elephant one bite at a time here. In January 2023, the French Parliament approved legislation that requires all new and existing car parks with more than 80 spaces to have at least 50% coverage with solar panels. French car parks could generate as much electricity as 10 nuclear power plants. Companies and councils all over the UK are introducing car park solar canopy schemes. A quick Google turned up Bentley and Crewe, Aviva in Norwich, and the British Geological Survey here in Keyworth, and councils North Norfolk District, Leicester City, London Borough of Sutton, Wiltshire, Portsmouth, Oxford, Northumberland. There are two parts to this motion. The first is about encouraging other organisations to cover their existing and new car parks with solar panels in our role as the local planning authority, even requiring this where national policy allows us to do so. This will mean including suitable wording in planning policies and conditions, providing guidance and so on. The second part is about what Rushcliffe can do directly with the car parks we own. A feasibility study will hopefully identify a suitable site or sites for projects to start being implemented. There are many considerations aside from the benefits of the green energy generated. Financial modelling will be needed. Of course, our diligent finance team will be looking at this aspect very carefully to ensure prudent investment of public funds. But this should not be evaluated just as a revenue generating opportunity. As well as counting the beans, the carbon savings and other environmental benefits need to be factored in. Costs of such schemes are coming down, I'm told, and there may be grants available, who knows. As Rushcliffe, we can look at how we can use the electricity ourselves to help reduce our energy bills, heating our leisure centres and swimming pools, for example, electric vehicle charging, perhaps. Other important considerations for the study might be the availability of a grid connection to allow export of surplus energy and battery storage. In terms of individual sites, it would be necessary to look at security, shading, orientation, layout, any slope of the site, water runoff, locations for equipment like inverters, and the design of canopies to avoid loss of car parking spaces, with consideration also of visual impact. There may be a good time in the life cycle of a car park, for instance, a new development or when resurfacing or replacing lighting. Much to consider. But if other organisations and councils can make the business an environmental case for this, why not Rushcliffe? I ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Sue Mallender, please.
I would like to second this motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. We'll open it up to discussion, starting with Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to propose an amendment. I'm conscious of the time, and I do have a seconder, Mr. Mayor.
Who's your seconder, please, Councillor Upton?
My seconder is Councillor Harry.
Councillor Upton, do you wish to speak or reserve your right to speak?
But he's going to present his.
You're going to present it?
Yeah. Yeah. So Roger needs to present it.
I will present the amendment. I thought you would want confirmation from Harry.
Confirmation of the seconder, please, yes.
Yeah. I reserve the rights.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the amendment to the motion, and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Orme. Councillor Upton.
Thank you. I've got a few words to say, and then perhaps we could put the amendment on the screen, if that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
On, is it?
Yep.
Oh, right. Oh, there we are. You're ahead of me. It's been a long day. Well, to be fairly brief, we support the spirit of this motion, as you can probably see on the screen, as solar energy generation is already a key part of our carbon management action plan, and we're happy to make a reference to car park solar canopies in our emerging design guide and any other appropriate documents, as mentioned by Councillor Thomas just now. We already have a small-scale solar canopy installation at the Gamston Community Hall car park, which some of you I'm sure are aware of, which is linked to EV charging points. However, these installations can be expensive, and I've recently heard of an estimated cost around the £4 million mark to provide these canopies to a relatively small car park, so they are costly. And in our climate, perhaps small wind turbines might be a more financially viable alternative, but I'll leave it at that. To commission a feasibility study into the installation of more solar canopies on our own car parks seems to us to be appropriate. But until this is completed, prioritised and costed, as my proposed amendment, I would not wish to commit to a capital project or projects at this stage, and therefore my proposed amendment is just taking out those few words at the end of item 2 with a view to bringing forward a capital project or projects by way of an exemplar. I think now is not the time, but other than that, that's my amendment, and we will ask you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Thomas, are you happy to accept this motion, please?
Yes, we accept the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Well, then we'll open the motion up for debate. Councillor Jan Walker. Thank you, Liz.
It won't surprise you to know that we support this motion. I'm sort of slightly sad about the amendments because I think that was the one bit that gave it teeth. You know, nice ideas are all very good, but actually doing something on this field seems to be quite hard. If it's cost effective to put them on to create solar farms, I can't help feeling that at least on large car parks it should also be cost effective. I'm not entirely against solar farms because there's an opportunity to increase biodiversity underneath the panels. But clearly, it's much better to use the brownfield sites we have, including the large number of big sheds that are now available in Rushcliffe for this. I think there are issues to do with links to the grid and that which needs to be considered. But, you know, we have to do this. We have to undertake a feasibility study. And I hope that it will lead to the opportunity to invest something in this in Rushcliffe.
Thank you, Councillor Gowland. Councillor Gaunt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to speak because I was not to talk over what Councillor Gowland said at all, but just also add to the fact that I was quite sad that he'd removed the example of something to spend. I was going to provide Ruddington as an opportunity to put that forward because we want a car park and we would love to be the people with the solar panels. I wanted to get that in before Councillor Birch mentioned Bingham car park. But also, a little bit of a political point. In 2006, the last time we had a Labour government, we did put in place a law that would have required all housing, new housing from 2016 to be net zero. That was removed in 2011 by the coalition Conservative-led government. If that had been in place, all the housing that's been built since 2016 in our borough, thousands of houses would have had to take into account where they're going to put solar panels and put them on car parks, stuff like that. So that's really tragic that all those houses have been built without that. But the other wider point I want to make is there's a community in Abu Dhabi that I teach about called Masdar City that some people may have heard of. It's a sustainable city of 100,000 people. And that sustainable city recycles water and all sorts in the desert. It does an amazing job. But the main driver behind its ability to be sustainable is that it has communal car parking. People walk into their apartments. That provides quiet streets for kids to play on. Wonderful. But it also provides somewhere for car parking with solar panels on the roofs. Solar panels on the roofs of those car parks and on the roofs of buildings, 100% of the electricity that's used by 100,000 people comes from that. And it's absolutely crackpot that we're not in that situation ourselves. Obviously, that's in a desert. They get lots of sunlight. I'm aware of that. I'm not, oh God, I better tell the kids next time. I'm aware of that fact. But there are other things we can add into our things as well when we develop these things. It doesn't have to be 100% electricity, but it certainly would reduce our electricity use in our homes and in our communities. So I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea. Shame we've taken out the teeth. Shame we've taken out the example that we could have spent money on again. But yeah, please support this motion. It's a no-brainer.
Thank you, Councillor Gaunt. Councillor Richard Mulliner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, happy to support the motion and indeed as amended. I was just having a look and seeing how we were doing at the moment. Apparently, Rushcliffe is currently fired up and producing a tiny, tiny amount of power at the moment. But in the last, let's have a look, in the last year, just shy of 90%. Oops, let's have a quick look. There we go. Renewables, just shy of 38, 39% of power in the UK has been produced by renewables. That's a figure that's only going to go up using car park solar panels as a canopy. Great idea. Let's put them on some of these big sheds that we're putting up for businesses around the place as well. Let's require the developers to put them on the roofs of the houses as well. We all want to see it. We all know it's a sensible thing to do. We all know it's cheaper than retrofitting. It should have been done for years, as it has been done in many other places as well. So, great idea. Happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manager. Councillor Clark, please.
That's quick. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, as you can obviously see from the amendment, we support the principle of the and the spirit of the motion. I mean, the reason really for amending the last bit was some people might interpret that as an actual commitment to go ahead before you've actually assessed the feasibility and the finances of it. So having a feasibility study, that doesn't stop the projects like in Ruddington that you've indicated, doesn't stop those being looked at as a feasibility study. And if they are proven to be feasible, then there's a proposal to come forward then to actually instigate it. So this isn't meant to be just undertake a feasibility study and then forget about it. If it's feasible, great, go for it. So, as Councillor Gaunt quite rightly sort of confessed or whatever, we are slightly different in this country weather-wise. I mean, even Southern Europe, in France and dare I say Italy as well, the car parks, supermarkets, etc., have lots of solar panels on their car parks, and obviously in the Middle East and all those countries that have got a lot more sunshine, they all have solar panels because they are providing, they're using the sun pretty much every day and to produce electricity. And I also, Councillor Mallender just mentioned about putting solar panels on all houses. I was going to settle, we could suggest in all industrial buildings, all commercial buildings should all have solar panels on when they are given planning permission. But didn't want to put that into the motion because I didn't want to detract from the original spirit of the motion about our own car parks. So these things all need to be looked at. They all need to be looking at the renewable energy that is produced in the borough of Rushcliffe, and I'm happy that we do that, and I'm happy that feasibility studies are undertaken. And as I say, if those projects prove that they are feasible, we'll go for them.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Perek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wholeheartedly support this amended motion about undertaking a feasibility study. I've got some case studies over here. The Apple car park has integrated solar canopies in its parking areas to power up its campus sustainably, demonstrating its commitment to renewable energy. And we have the Denver Airport in Colorado, who has also installed solar canopies in its parking lots, providing shade and generating significant amounts of renewable energy for airport operations. And last but not the least, the MIT in Cambridge has also implemented solar canopies to reduce its energy cost and carbon footprint while providing shaded parking for students and staff. So in conclusion, solar canopies in car parks can offer a wide range of benefits, and I'm looking forward to see the outcome of the feasibility studies.
As nobody else has indicated to speak, so Councillor Birch.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support the motion, and I can understand the reasons for the amendments. I would much rather see solar panels in urban environments than on viable farmlands. I'll just give you a very quick my bona fides when it comes to the environment. I've planted 10,000 trees on the family farm. I drive an electric car. I've not been on a plane since 17, so I do consider myself an environmentalist. Please don't assign nefarious motive to what I'm about to say, but I would just put a little dampener on the expectation with solar panels. I think it surprises people how inefficient and how little power generation does come from them. I think people, the public at large, assume you put a few solar panels down and you can power a building or you can power large sites. You cannot. But I agree with the motion, and I think as an example, I think it would be a good thing. I think the word example is important here to set an example to other councils and other local authorities, and I fully support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Nobody else wishes to speak? Thank you.
Sorry, Alan. I think it's an excellent motion. We've done a feasibility study in Bingham on commercial property that we own, and the payback is about 4.5 to 5 years to address the issue of the efficiency. So I'm pretty hoarse because I was shouting at the screen on Sunday. So to get around the efficiencies, the best thing to do is have an on-site power bank, which allows you to then capture and then obviously send the electricity out in peak times. I think it's an excellent motion. Obviously, we're supporting it, and our feasibility studies supports that it is viable. So I think we'll get to execution I think, in a fairly short period of time, once the feasibility study has been complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reagan. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? If not, Councillor Mallon, you reserve your right to speak for the seconder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like has been said before, I would have preferred the motion to stay as a whole. However, it's better that we work together in sort of coalition in order to have everyone's views shown here, just like we did with other motions, such as the plastic-free Rushcliffe, the climate emergency, and the tree planting motions that we've passed unanimously at this council with negotiation, because the previous motion, that's what that was talking about, and that's how we get representation of all the people. But anyway, back to this motion. We find in our house that our solar panels do provide running our house mostly. And what happens in the countries that are in the north is that you have to think that it's light, not heat. That's important here. So as long as it's light, and it's light for a long time in the northern hemisphere, so at those extremes, so you get more light at some times of year. So that's sort of the swings and roundabouts. It's not just very hot countries that they are benefit to. So I'm going to refer to a report on solar energy. It's not written by ER or by Just Stop Oil or even Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth, but the Campaign for Protection of Rural England, not a radical organisation that's full out for that sort of environmental radical ideas. But 97% of the members of CPRE want a standard requirement for all new buildings and all car parks to have solar panels. This will reduce carbon, cut bills, spare land for farming and wildlife. Solar car parks enable electricity produced in open spaces that tend to be positioned near to energy guzzling facilities, such as shopping areas, offices, healthcare establishments. So they're providing energy directly to that community, rather than the current situation where solar farms are often in very rural areas and they need to have extensive infrastructure to take that generated power to the grid. And those canopies have additional benefits in that they protect the vehicles from rain or snow or very hot sun. The CPRE's report was published with UCL's Energy Institute, and that the potential in the built environment is about 117 gigawatts. And of that, 11 gigawatts are car parks. And 11 gigawatts is 60 million solar panels, which can power 12 million homes. And not that I approve of eating elephants under any circumstances, as in Councillor Thomas's metaphor, but I do fully agree that solar generation in Rushcliffe's car park would be a start and an example to developers. So to put those solar panels on their dwellings and their other buildings, especially the big warehouses and their very large buildings. So they should be built with solar panels already incorporated on their roofs. And possibly with more and more councils setting the example of solar on car park canopies, it might even influence the government, hopefully that's going to happen, to bring in planning legislation to have solar panels on new build and even encourage retrospective installation. So perhaps rather than eating an elephant, we can be a small part in making a solar elephant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender. And I call Councillor Thomas to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful for the support that seems to be coming around from the room. I'll just say to the people on my right here that in accepting the amendment, I'm not saying that I don't want projects to come forward. And just as Councillor Mallender says, it's a question of working together really, and getting something that everybody can sign up to. And there's no point doing a feasibility study if you wouldn't have a project. In terms of deciding where the first project might come, that's perhaps something we could decide by proportional representation, something that votes along those lines, rather than just allocating it to Ruddington. But there we go. And I do take the point that this is only part of the picture. It's only one bite of the solar elephant, as it were. But you've got to start somewhere. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So we'll go to the vote. I'll just remind you of the motion. This council believes that car park solar canopies could have considerable potential to contribute to solar energy generation in Rushcliffe in an environmentally friendly way. The council will encourage this by 1, including suitable text in relevant policies, strategies and guidance notes, and secondly, undertaking a feasibility study in installation of canopies on its own car parks. So all those in favour, please. I declare the motion is carried. And we'll go now finally to item 12 on the agenda to answer questions submitted by councillors under Standing Order number 11. And I invite Councillor Jen Walker to put a question to Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having visited some metropolitan housing in my ward this week, I've witnessed firsthand how poor attempts at repair from our housing providers have led to leaks and drafts, resulting in a young family living in damp and mouldy conditions. Is it proper that Rushcliffe Borough Council continue to sit on money intended to go to registered housing providers when families are having to spend time chasing up the registered housing provider to get poor workmanship put right whilst living in poor housing conditions? Thank you.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you for your question. Frankly, we don't sit on any money. Our budget, which was approved by full council early this year, set out various budget headings, and it remains a challenge to balance income with expenditure. There is no surplus money. The Section 106 monies we hold are for specific purposes, specific projects, such as schools, health and roads, that have been requested by various agencies as part of the planning process. It's not our money. We act as the banker until the money is requested for the project. It's certainly not for repairs and maintenance of housing that is owned and managed by resident housing providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Councillor Walker, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, no, it wasn't about Section 106 money and sale. It was about the kind of the carry forward from that was supposed to go to the registered housing providers. It was that money that I was talking about.
With respect, I didn't think the question was that clear. We have talked about this in previous discussions, and the carry forward on those projects, I can't disclose the commercial confidentiality of them, but the carry forward is either for projects that have some slippage year on year for whatever reason, and there are good reasons I could go into, but broadly speaking, the other carry forwards in the budget are accounted for. The budget is fully committed, and it is a tight budget with no surpluses. But in any event, it would not be in our responsibility to put capital finance into revenue repairs to housing associations that are clearly responsible for their repairs and maintenance to their housing stock. We regularly publicise to tenants and others how to contact and to deal with complaints, and there is a procedure for that. For the examples that you mentioned, I'm well aware of that. And the Social Housing Act, Regulation Act of 2023 gives quite a lot of detail there and ways that they can make the point about housing repairs and defects. But we only last week at Cabinet, I brought a new housing enforcement policy to Cabinet, which we approved last week, and that gives a whole raft of options for people and tenants and various others to progress concerns and get actions about maintenance and repairs of all housing, private rented, social rented, and to some degree owner occupied. So that is my point that I make in your supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Now I invite second question, Councillor Mason, to put a question to the leader. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the leader please inform this council of any discussions he has had with our new MP and the government regarding the proposed changes to house building targets and planning laws? Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, very pertinent question. We'll probably refer back to it again a bit later on. But directly in answer, yes, as I indicated in my leader's announcements, I did actually write to James Naish MP, as I said earlier, to invite him to visit Rushcliffe, but I also then talked in my letter about pressing issue of our local plan, currently being reviewed for eventual adoption by the council, and to talk about the green belt, etc. So I haven't actually established contact. He hasn't responded to that as yet, but I'm hopeful and optimistic that we'll get a response fairly shortly, and then we can start discussing those details. But in the meantime, I'm already in contact with the LGA and through them as regards planning, etc., to ensure that we do actually have a good understanding of how the government will be bringing planning issues forward. But certainly, in terms of making sure that as soon as as James Naish responds, then I would like to be in discussion with him in very short order.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Mason, do you have a supplementary?
Yep, I do. Does the leader agree with me that together with the number of homes built and proposed in the local plan, Rushcliffe has more than met its fair share of house building, and therefore any future requirements should go to councils who have not been as responsible as Rushcliffe Borough Council? Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, yeah, certainly the Labour government in their manifesto, they made it very clear that they would be proposing planning reforms and getting house building targets up. I certainly hope that the developers and the house builders will be able to get the capacity to do that. But it's interesting as part of Councillor Mason's supplementary in terms of the number of homes being built. And I think that Rushcliffe has played more than their part and fair share of house building, especially, just to remind you, Mr. Mayor, in the last local plan, 13,150 houses, of which 9,500 were for duty to cooperate to help meet the City Council meet their housing targets. So I think that's quite a substantial contribution to helping meet other people's targets. Therefore, I sincerely hope that Rushcliffe will not become a target for large-scale house building in the future, because we have already played a substantial part, a lot more than many other councils around the country, in providing allocations for house building. And also, I'd like to remind the council, there's probably nearly 500,000 planning permissions still outstanding that have not yet been built. So planning permissions are there, they just need to be built by the house builders.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Move to the third question. Invite Councillor Plant to put a question to Councillor Upton. Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Due to the spending pressures on the mandatory disabled facilities grant, Cabinet on July the 12th, 2022, approved the amendment of the policy to temporarily suspend the use of the discretionary disabled facilities grant allocation until the review of the national formula allocation is undertaken. That decision was taken 2 years ago, so can the Cabinet member inform me if the discretionary disabled facility grants allocation is likely to be reinstated anytime soon?
Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Councillor Plant, for your question. My short answer is no. We simply do not have the money to give discretionary top-ups. Our budget, which was approved by full council earlier this year, has no discretionary allocation for disability facilities grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Plant?
Thank you. I actually did expect that to be the answer. But does Councillor Upton think it's right or appropriate that it is a decision made temporarily by Cabinet 2 years ago, a decision that does affect the quality of life for our most vulnerable residents, has taken 2 years to be resolved? And should that decision to permanently suspend the discretionary disabled facility grant not be minuted somewhere? Thank you.
Councillor Upton.
Understand your point. It is discretionary what we're talking about at the moment, and you know, the grant we get, the mandatory grant that we get, is under extreme pressure. It's under pressure for a number of reasons. The demand, the demographics, the demand is getting more and more year on year, and the actual type of adaptations that we do is getting more and more complex and more costly. So we are struggling to meet the demand on the grant that we get. And I think you mentioned that the formula, we are working with the county council who allocate the funds around Nottinghamshire to us and other districts and boroughs. We're working with them to try and persuade the government of the day for a more equitable allocation of this grant, the basic grant, to try and address the increasing demand that we're having year on year. And that is, there is an urgency about that. There's an urgency about that because this council, as I recall, chipped in £500,000 of its money just to keep the scheme running last year in 23-24. So, you know, in terms of topping up, we've done some of that, but that's not sustainable. And why should it be? I mean, we are fulfilling our mandatory requirements on the basic needs of an increasing demand and a more expensive and complex adaptations, but the discretionary top-ups, quite frankly, are just not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Now move to the final question of the evening. Councillor Gaunt to put his question to the leader, Councillor Clark. Councillor Gaunt.
Thank you. I nearly called him Madam Mayor, sorry. Mr. Mayor, sorry, nearly happened.
That cost you a tenner.
It didn't happen there. So, yeah, I apologise because it's fairly similar to what's already been asked, but there is a reason. How are the council and officers preparing for the transition to a new Labour government, and what levels of strategic planning have taken place for any changes in direction that the council may face and be brought about with that?
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting. Councillor Gaunt should say there's a reason. Yes, there's always a reason for asking a question. I'm just wondering if that question is sort of slightly premature, being as the government is only, what is it, a couple of weeks old. And I think we are still, although we've now heard the King's speech yesterday, which got over 35 new bills anticipated. I think it's still very early days as to what the actual demands that the government make on councils. We've heard a lot about potential demands. Officers certainly have been looking at the manifesto pledges and Cabinet colleagues and officers have been looking at the potential new bills, etc. And of course, as regards particular issues which will affect this borough specifically, then obviously the planning legislation is one of the prime ones which will be affecting us. And we need to make sure, and we will be ready to carry on discussions and to alter plans as and when necessary. But of course, we will still want to continue conducting our own policies as well.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Gaunt, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Yeah. Just to clarify, the recent peer review that we just had said that we could be more could be done to prepare for the issues coming down the tracks for residents. We put forward a feasibility study for council housing in the budget, the alternative budget that we put forward, that was clearly coming down the track with the new Labour government. Obviously, it's a bit presumptuous to assume that was going to be the case, but it turned out to be. So what we're wondering is, really the thrust of this question was to find out, will the council commit to being more proactive in looking at what is being suggested in things like the King's Speech, to look at responding more quickly and proactively on the front foot rather than sort of in a rear guard move, so that we can actually meet things coming down the track rather than getting hit by them when they hit us on the way down the track, if that makes sense. It was a question.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Well, yeah, I understand what you're asking, and I think, again, as I did indicate, that does depend slightly on what the government edicts will actually be saying, which at the moment are not that clear. I have, in actual fact, had a letter from the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, which was dated 2 days ago, addressed to me, and it did refer to various. Well, it didn't actually refer to issues specifically. That's my point. It was a very general letter, and it even talked about how her cabinet colleagues understand that all too many councils are facing financial strain and have been left balancing new obligations with higher costs and interest rates after a decade of financial mismanagement from the centre. Well, I just wonder if she sent the same letter to both Rushcliffe Borough Council and Nottingham City Council, because if so, then perhaps she doesn't quite yet understand that some councils are better run financially than others. And perhaps we need to put her right that this council is extremely well run financially. But she also refers to devolution, and it is asking us to take up the offer of a devolution deal. I think Claire Ward is Labour. I think she's the mayor of the combined authority. I think perhaps somebody ought to tell Angela Rayner, we've already got a devolution deal, so why are you writing to us? Apart from that, the letter doesn't say very much, even though it's 1.5 pages long. So I think in answer to your, well, both your original and your supplementary question, I think the Labour government needs to be a bit clearer as to what they're actually saying to local councils before we are able to respond in a clear way. But having said all that, absolutely, we are ready to respond. We're ready to have discussions, because at the end of the day, this is all about the residents and businesses in Rushcliffe. And so we will ensure that we do engage with our new MP, and we will ensure that we engage with the government as and when they have something specific to say to us.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Well, that concludes business of the evening. Thank you, members, for attending. Drive home carefully, and thank you for being so kind to me on my first council.